As you can see on the screen share, we are having another training event, and we're very pleased that Dr. Winbigler has agreed to share with us his skills and expertise in the area of motivational interviewing. For those of you who are unfamiliar, this is an excellent intervention strategy by which one can elicit responses from those that you are attempting to support in order to help them to come to conclusions about the best practices and supports that will help them achieve their goals. So with that, you are very welcome to join us. Please RSVP so we can make sure everybody has a chair and at least some bit of breakfast in the morning. So again, that'll be on Saturday, August 7th at the Hill in Claiborne County of Tazewell. I am very happy that you have joined us here today to hear more about how the faith-based community can best support and encourage persons who are recovering or actively using opioids, and also how to best support their families in transitioning to healthy lives. So with this, we have two panels of experts who will be joining us today. The first is a faith-based panel, and the second will be persons who have been in recovery and have interacted with the faith-based community. And both will be sharing their lessons learned, strategies that have worked well, and challenges that may have placed a barrier in their treatment or recovery. So with this, I would like to ask that everyone at this point, please turn off of your videos and mute your device so that when we have the speakers, we will have the maximum broadband available for the speaker. And if you wish, I would also encourage you to change to speaker mode, and that will help you also to remain more focused as they share their presentation. Without any further ado, I am now going to turn it over to Eric Landry from the Metropolitan Drug Council, who will be sharing with us a brief overview of the faith-based community and their role in opioid use disorder prevention, treatment, and recovery. Eric?
Thank you, Lori. Brian, I can't screen share with you. Thank you, brother. Appreciate that. Okay, now we're good. Thank you. Glad to be here with you today. My name is Eric Landry. I'm with Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services in association with Metro Drug Coalition. Going to cover a few slides about faith-based initiative and some state services that we have to offer, kind of what we do at the state level and what's out there for you. In our state, we have about 1,800 overdose deaths, and a majority of those deaths are because of prescription opioids, about 1,100 suicides, and 1,090 babies born with chemical dependence. A lot of people want to help, but are not sure how to help. So what we at the state level have figured out is that there's about 1,200 congregations and institutions out there encompassing about 3.5 million people. So if you do the math on that, that's about 2,500 people of faith for every one person that we lose to suicide or overdose. 2,500 chances to reach that person and make a difference. So how do we tap into those 2,500 faith-based organizations and those congregants and those people that are involved with ministries to be able to get those folks services, to be able to get those folks education so that they will either be able to provide a service or be able to refer to a service? And that's what the state's intent is, to educate and to connect. My boss, Monty Burks, always says the opposite of addiction is connection. But a lot of times people don't understand how to get connected, who to connect to, who to call when there's a crisis. A lot of pastors want to do the heavy lifting as far as knowing what to do whenever they have people with substance abuse and mental health issues in their congregations or in their organizations, but they don't know who to call or who to contact. And usually, especially in rural communities, there's one or two people that they get in contact with. What the state wants to do is we want to be able to contact folks with services so that they can actually be more effective in that. And in that, getting those congregations and those organizations education so that they know how to help and how to reach out. So what the state has done is we have 3 faith-based community coordinators. I'm in East Tennessee. My brother Jamie Harper, he takes care of Middle Tennessee, which is about 45 counties, and Miss Amy Bechtel does West Tennessee, which includes Shelby County, which is a whole different animal there. But I have all 22 counties in East Tennessee's Grand Division, so I'm your point of contact when it comes to faith-based organizations, training, getting in contact with how to get services and different things like that. And we're going to go through some other aspects of that as we go through it. We've done 620, actually that's a little closer to 700 recovery congregations in the state, educational forums in all 95 counties. And what those educational forums do is we educate with community leaders and people within the county, within the organization, of what services are actually in their counties, and get those folks networked in with the other people in their county that are already doing some of the same things to be able to increase awareness and recovery support. And we want to be a resource for you, whether we can get you the trainings or get you connected with the people that have the services and have the trainings available to you. So some of the things we as faith-based coordinators do is we offer free training opportunities to empower and equip ministries so that they'll be able to adequately respond to these issues. Understanding is a big part of it, to be able to do the mission and the message that needs to be accomplished, to be able to connect folks with resources, to get people help, and to collaborate with others inside their local communities, and help the ministries that are already out there trying to help to be able to be more effective and to be able to make a good impact in their communities. So some of the things we offer as a resource as faith-based community coordinators is we do suicide prevention, which is QPR. It helps people be able to respond to people having suicide ideations and how to refer those individuals to appropriate help. There's also an applied suicide intervention skills, which is how you implement suicide intervention yourself, and that's a little bit longer training. Both of these trainings are free. Both of these trainings are offered by me and by the other faith-based coordinators. We also do ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences, where we teach trauma-informed care, which basically focuses on community connection and how to refer and how to deal with certain situations when a person is in mental health and issues and having trauma. And then a Strong Brains class, which shows the effects of adverse childhood experiences on early developing brains and the architecture of early development and nutrition and environment and different things like that. Mental health first aid, these all encompass basically one brief thing. We say this many times a day. We hear this many times a day. We hear people say, how are you? Most of the time the answer is fine. I'm doing well. I'm doing good. But sometimes the answer will come back and say, I'm not doing so well today. I'm having an issue. I'm having a problem. Most folks don't know how to respond when the answer is not fine. And what a big part of mental health first aid does is it allows you to be able to know how to deal with the person's answer when it's not in the positive, how to get that person referred to services, how to ask questions to be able to help and be able to stabilize. And then we do some addiction classes about Addicted Mind. This is a couple-hour presentation where we talk about the effects of chemical addiction on the brain, sexual compulsion in the church, and support group facilitation. This is a 3-day training that actually allows congregations to effectively provide groups. Some congregations want to do groups and want to do ministries, but they're not sure how to construct them, how to facilitate them, what curriculum they need to use. We will come in and be able to help you get some stuff started and get some structure around the ministries that you're attempting to get started. So how's this all work? Basically what the state's put together is faith-based coordinators. We network folks in and we get people training as appropriate to what their congregations and what their ministries want to do. We're kind of liaisons between the agencies. There's also Project Lifeline. Project Lifeline coordinators get folks connected with services in the treatment environment. They're very well networked in with who has beds and what's appropriate, whether it be faith-based, non-faith-based, people needing halfway houses or longer-term treatment options. Lifeliners can get those folks connected with those services. We also have Tennessee Recovery Navigators. These are individuals that actually meet people in the emergency room after they've had an overdose. to see about getting services and see about getting those people treatment or appropriate services or appropriate referral sources to the family, so that if the person doesn't want the treatment or doesn't want it to move from that ER environment into some type of treatment facility, that the family at least has the information when that person gets ready. We can get those folks connected to services. And regional overdose prevention specialists, ROPES. These folks are, and you'll get contact information on all of these at the end of my presentation. But the regional overdose prevention specialists, basically what they do is stigma reduction and naloxone training to be able to provide people with Narcan that need it, people that are at risk, facilities that are at risk, that we see people with substance abuse issues. And I get a lot of pushback whenever it comes to naloxone. So I'm going to give you something brief on that. I talk to a lot of pastors that say we don't have substance abuse issues in our congregations. We don't have anybody like that. So the next question is, well, are you praying for anyone's family member who has substance abuse issues? And most of the time they'll tell us yes. Oh yes, Sister Betty has a nephew and he's on drugs and he's on pills, or whatever the answer would be. And we've been praying for him. So the next step in this parade is what happens when he comes to service? What happens when he shows up and you know he's going to have substances in his system and sits back there on the back pew? You have a potential overdose, you have a potential death sitting back there in your back pew. And if they lose consciousness, what are we going to do? If you don't have naloxone or Narcan available at that time, you're looking at a death in your congregation instead of just an overdose. So we want to provide you with naloxone as an appropriate safety measure, just like facilities have fire extinguishers, because those fire extinguishers provide a pathway out. That's the same thing Narcan does. It provides a pathway out of addiction, and it can actually save a life and give that person enough time to get first responders there. So that's just kind of brief on those things. Your Lifeline coordinators, I'll leave this slide up here for a minute, but we have the Lifeline coordinators. These are Lifeline Peer Project regional coordinators that connect people with services. So if there is a person seeking any type of alcohol and drug treatment, these are the folks that can actually get you the help. There's phone numbers and contact information for each region. So you just find your county and you contact the appropriate person for that covers your region. Questions for me? That was a lot of information. That's 12 slides in 10 minutes. So I got about 8 seconds left if anybody has any questions.
Can we have those slides?
Of course you can.
Okay, great. I'll send you an email. I have it.
I will send you a longer presentation that has about 22 slides with more information on it, and you can feel free to distribute that. So
Great,
I will stop sharing and turn it back over to Miss Laurie.
Eric, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation and the overview of all the good work that you and the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse are doing in relation to the faith-based community, which of course has greater implications for our communities in general. And if it's possible, Eric, if you could share those slides with me, we can also make sure that they go up on the TennesseeOpioid.utk.edu website as well.
I will do that. I'm not sure. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my computer's buffering. I'm not sure if my slide presentation is still there or not, but I'm attempting to exit that.
How's that? Oh, now it went back.
Or can you shut it down? Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
There we go.
There we go.
Just another reminder, if you are not presenting at this time, I would ask that you turn your cameras off and that everyone remain on mute, again, to enhance the broadband access for all those who are presenting at any time. So thank you for that. I have the great pleasure of moderating our first panel, which are our local faith-based leaders who have had extensive experience in promoting substance use disorder prevention, treatment, and recovery. And With that, I would like to give you a brief overview of who will be on the panel and the structure by which we will follow the panel format. So our first presenter will be Reverend Marta Cogburn. Her first calling was as a nurse practitioner, and her career spanned 30 years, and it took her from the coal fields of Kentucky and Tennessee to a village in Mexico and a rural county in Parrotsville, Tennessee. Her second calling was as a minister. It began in 2005 and led her from First United Methodist Church in Newport to Jubilee Project in Sneedville, and then back to First United Methodist of Newport, where she is now serving as the Director of Recovery Ministries. Our second presenter will be Pastor Kyle Pritchard. He has been the senior pastor at the Hill Church in Tazewell of Claiborne County since it first opened its doors in 2017. He leads with a vision to be a church that unchurched people want to attend. This includes a focus on recovery ministry and reaching those who are oftentimes overlooked in the community. And last but not least is Reverend Deborah Schultz. She has been a licensed ordained minister for 20 years and a substance abuse prevention practitioner for 10. She is the founder and CEO of Rescue 180 Incorporated and executive director of Rescue 180, which is Jefferson County Substance Abuse Coalition, and she has served in this position for 13 years. Rescue 180's mission has been to bring prevention education to our community from the cradle to the grave. Reverend Schultz has been an active part of the 4th Judicial Recovery Court as a team and board member for 8 years and now directs the Jefferson County Resource Center that aids her community, as well as in re-entry of inmates dealing with addiction. It's a great pleasure to have our panel members today. As far as our approach, each panel member, in the order I read the names, Reverend Marta, Reverend Kyle, Reverend Deborah, will each have 13 minutes to present. I will provide a 2-minute and a 1-minute warning as we're approaching the end of the presentation. And at this time, we will move on to the next presenter. Following this, we will have 10 minutes for question and answer. So while our panelists are presenting, I warmly invite you to pose your questions or maybe your comments to the chat board. So without further ado, I would like at this point to turn the floor over to Marta. Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you, Lori. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here. I want to tell you our story. In 2012, when the opioid problem became a real crisis, every time there was a headline, it seemed like Cocke County was in one of those top 10 worst lists. We couldn't avoid it anymore. We had to realize that this problem had come not just close to home, but it was in our living rooms, and it was in our kids' bedrooms, and hiding out in our garages and basements too. And then some people in our church started talking about it, people who knew, people who were educated in the problem, and they realized they were there to help us and to try to help us decide that we needed to do something about it. So we had a vision at our church, a vision statement. It said we're there to love, grow, reach, and serve. And how can we make that vision become a reality in relation to the recovery problem? And then the final straw that got us on the bandwagon was the death of 2 young members in our church, not from overdose, but from severe complications related to their substance use disorder. So our pastor's leadership was key. He started a sermon series on our love, grow, reach, and serve vision, especially related to recovery. And then one Sunday, he gave us index cards, and he asked us to write down what we would do about it and bring that card to the altar. And from that, we had, I think 60 responses in our congregation. He scheduled a meeting right after church one Sunday, and he asked us one question. He said, "Why are you here?" And that, just having to answer that in a public space really helped us all to realize we did indeed have issues with substance use disorder in our congregation. And not just substance use, but other compulsive behaviors that robbed us of life. And so we set out and we decided that the first thing we needed to do was a step study that was led by someone who was experienced, who was deep in her own recovery and very sensitive to where we were as a congregation and where things were in our community. It was a great experience, and it helped us all to grow in the realization that it's not us and them, it's just us. We educated ourselves. We visited other programs. We went to churches that looked like us, and churches that were bigger than us and smaller than us, and churches in communities like ours, and different other communities. And we wanted to match our community and congregation. We decided to go with Celebrate Recovery. They gave us a leader's guide, which helped us a great deal. And that just helped us to get started. They also had a state representative, which was very helpful in us finding our way in this ministry. We hired a director, that was me, who could devote a lot of time to the effort. And then we began to assign work groups. And I apologize for the noise behind me. Today is the day the construction started. But we had assigned work groups for hospitality and childcare, security, food, music, all sorts of things, so that it became a team leadership. We found every source for free publicity that we could manage. And that was for radio groups, civic groups, other recovery groups, outpatient recovery rehab programs, other things, drug court, anywhere we could get a free voice. We tried to do that. That was important because we really didn't have a budget at that point. Community involvement was important, both for me and for all team members. We joined this group, the RCORE group. There's a grassroots program in our community, in Powercott County. We joined their forces. The Choice Health Network, the Public Health Department was invaluable. The school system was a great resource of getting us access to addiction counseling with students, not counseling, but education. The Children's Advocacy Board is a board related to our Department of Children's Services, and they were helpful in referring parents to our groups. There were other relief organizations that we joined too, like food distributions and homeless counts, just to be in touch with people who were in need of recovery, as if we didn't need enough of it ourselves. One major roadblock we encountered was stigma. Stigma in our congregation, stigma in our community, and stigma in other recovery efforts. We found that education was our best defense. We began book studies, and I've also included a resource list for you, including some of those books if you want to get it. We visited every group in our church, talking about the mission, talking about the education. We involved our own Sunday school classes and other civic groups and churches in providing food and being a part of our team. We held special events for foster children and for senior adults who were taking care of their own grandkids, just to help them navigate what sometimes seems like a deep jungle that they were all in. We held a community supper, which included an addiction counselor from Cornerstone Recovery in Knoxville, and one of our own members who has a story of lived experience, and it was a powerful thing. We educated ourselves on suicide prevention, Narcan use, and the trauma-informed brain, adverse childhood experiences, as Eric has already talked about. We talked about harm reduction, and we invited Choice Health to come with their van and show us what it was all about. We have other agencies that come and do what we call the 5-minute blurb right before our recovery meeting starts, so that our community can know what's out there to help them through this. And some of us are ACEs trainers, and we go to schools and other civic groups to do that training to promote that word. For the AA group, they were rightfully so very guarded about their loyalty to the 12-step ministry, and we wanted to honor that. As one AA participant told us, AA saved my life, and I don't want to water that down in any way. So we were very careful about that. We invited AA and NA to meet in our church buildings on a regular basis. And we were very careful to organize joint meetings with them. We asked their members to come and give their story as part of the testimony time for our Celebrate Recovery meetings. One of the joint meetings we organized was a New Year's Eve movie night where we watched the Lois Wilson story. It was a good time for us to talk together about what compulsive behaviors on both sides of this topic, what compulsive behaviors led to all the problems that we were experiencing. We also knew that we needed to change our vocabulary. As I said, it's not us and them, it's just us. And we know that we want to be careful to say persons with substance use disorder rather than addicts and things like that. We also looked long and hard at the difference between sobriety and recovery and understanding what that meant for all of us. And once we understood how trauma changes us, well, we had to change the question. The question is no longer what is wrong with you, but what happened to you. Some helpful things for you. On our speakers list, we have folks like Dr. Stephen Lloyd, who can tell us a lot about the science of addiction, and Dr. Monty Burks, who is a great motivational speaker. And as Eric shared some of the details from their presentation, he was very helpful in energizing our congregation. We've had our certified peer recovery specialists come and give their testimonies. We've had mental health providers, and some of the most amazing testimonies we've had have come from people who have no lived experience with substance use disorder, but they definitely have lived experience with other life-robbing behaviors. And then we work to bring the groups together, those with lived experience and those who suffer in other ways, to build compassion and understanding for both sides. Now, a little bit of advice, if I may, and I give this advice with some request for grace, I guess. I want to say to us faith-based folks, us church people, that we get into trouble when we convince ourselves that the solution to this problem is easy, that there's only one way out. And we also get into trouble when we think we have all the answers. God does, but we don't. And as I heard Dr. Burks say, the opposite of addiction was relationship. And I sometimes think that the rules and regulations we developed to say that people can belong really build more walls than they do relationships. So we own our history. We own the history that says that church has sometimes been part of the problem in compulsive behaviors, and we want to get out of that track that we've been on. A good step study is what taught us that. We pray for compassion. Compassion gives us eyes to see our neighbors as God sees, and ourselves as God sees us. We want to educate ourselves. We've already talked about some of those topics. And then we want to take care of ourselves. We want to get our rest, eat our Wheaties, and exercise, and of course, pray diligently. Pray diligently that God will give us guidance in a clear passageway, and that we might listen to others who would speak for God, even others that are among the people that we come to serve. So with that in mind, some other things that we churches can do is work to change policies. We can be a powerful voice. Talk about ACEs in your community and how the trauma informs addiction. We can talk about zero tolerance in our school systems. We can talk about how we might not want drug addicted kids at home alone all day, so zero tolerance may not be the best answer. We could talk about law enforcement and assessment before incarceration. We could talk about increasing access to mental health care. Follow Judge Sloan's work if you want to know about justice reform, and follow Dr. Lloyd's work if you want to know about health insurance reform. And I'd leave you with this word, that this work is enough to keep us humble, for we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And this work is enough to give us hope, because we've all been made in the image of God. So I'll leave you with that, friends, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so very much, Marta, for the inspiring words and for sharing the process of your work. Pastor Kyle, may I turn the floor to you, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Meschke. And what an absolute honor it is to be with you guys today and to be on this panel. And I'm just excited about what's going to come out of this. And I can already tell you that you're going to hear maybe some repeated stuff that Eric shared, some stuff that Marta that was fantastic, and I'm probably going to ditto some things that you said. And instead of you blanking out while you're watching, understand that it's emphasis that we're emphasizing as you hear things repeated from experience that other people have gone through, that you're hearing some emphasis on things. So maybe bold those in your mind, or all caps, give them all caps in your mind so you can remember these things. So really quick, my name is, I know Laurie already introduced me, but my name is Kyle Pritchard. I pastor the Hill Church in Claiborne County. We're up in Tazewell, Tennessee. I want to give you some quick history real quick on our church to help you understand kind of how we got to where we are right now. So God gave me a vision in 2016 to start the Hill Church. We started our church in 2017. Our first service was in February of 2017. And so part of that vision was to create a church on with an emphasis on recovery and reaching like that marginalized population in our community, those that are sometimes overlooked, those that are dealing with substance use disorder, those that are dealing with some mental health issues, the homeless people, the hungry people, the hurting people in our community that sometimes churches want to overlook, and so here we are today sharing some of that with you. So you're going to hear more about this during the second panel discussion. My wife, Elora, is going to be sharing some with you. She is in long-term recovery. And so being married to her gives me a very personal aspect of my desire to lead our congregation, to have a heart with those and for those that are dealing with substance use disorder. And of course, this desire to lead our congregation this direction is also fed from just seeing so many hurt and lost people. And I say it this way to my congregation a whole lot. Like when I say lost people, yes, I'm including those that are lost, that don't have a relationship with God through Jesus Christ, but I'm also talking about those that Christians, maybe people that got saved and entered into that relationship at a young age, that like the prodigal son have drifted away and gotten lost in life, and they get caught up in addiction and get caught up in mental health issues, and many either directly or indirectly have been turned away from churches in our community. And so somebody has to have a heart for these people. Marta mentioned this, we're all sinners and fall short of the glory of God. We're all slaves to sin. And so we recognize that reality with our church. And so we immediately upon starting our church began a focus on recovery and on those with substance use disorder. We started a weekly recovery support group. So our weekly meetings and the desire to do more in the community. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that with you in just a minute. God gave us a vision to create Live Free Claiborne, which is now a 501c3, which is mainly supported through our efforts of our church here. Live Free works tirelessly to eradicate substance use disorder in our community, to focus on education and stigma reduction, to focus on collaboration efforts with other like-minded organizations in our community, and to have resources available when they're needed, and also to be a resource in our community. So that's kind of the history of how we got to where we are. We are a Tennessee certified recovery congregation. We do focus very much on having the non-judgmental attitude and remembering that we're all broken and we all start at the same ground zero, which enables us through the power of God to allow anyone and everyone to come into our church, no matter what your make, model, or year is. We've got room for you here at the Hill. So I want to share a little bit about current efforts that we have going on here. So through the Hill Church, Live Free, which again is kind of a nonprofit spinoff of our church, operates a few ministry efforts here at our church. We have a clothing closet that's open a couple of times a week on a regular basis. And then we also do appointments for emergencies. And then that's also being used, and I love this, on many occasions to help somebody that's going in, that's gotten a bed at a rehab facility, inpatient facility somewhere. Typically, they only have on the clothes. They only have the clothes that they're wearing, and no pajamas and no toothbrush or anything like that. So we're able to get that stuff with them through our clothing closet. We have an emergency food pantry that again is open a couple of times a week or on an emergency basis. And then we also, through Live Free, offer financial assistance to anybody that needs help with an electric bill or all kinds of things like that. And so in January, we began putting together a syringe services program through a grant through the Tennessee Department of Health. Now, this includes a one-to-one syringe exchange, HIV and Hep C screenings. We hand out condoms for both men and women. We've got Narcan available, training available, education available. And so I can tell you from experience of starting this syringe services program, I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but I'm talking about from within our church and within the community, like some question that why have a syringe services program? Why do a one-to-one needle exchange? I love the fact that Marta was throwing around the words harm reduction. If the words harm reduction are not a part of your vocabulary, start working on that right now. Harm reduction needs to be a part of all our vocabularies. Real quick, I want to throw out some CDC numbers for you. And so chronic hepatitis C infections continue to rise, 20,000 each year since 2016. As of 2020, Claiborne County, that's our county here, is one of the top counties in the United States at risk for significant increases in hepatitis infection and or HIV breakout due to IV drug use. So here's some numbers. Claiborne County, again, that's my county, is number 80. I also want to mention, I've got some neighboring counties here. They may not even be included in this today, but this will give you an idea of all of our areas that we're living. Granger County, so Claiborne County is number 80 in the nation. Granger County is number 16 in the nation. Union County is number 74 in the nation. I know we've got Dawn on here. She's going to talk a little bit later from Union County. And then Hancock County is number 13 in the nation. And so what's really cool is since opening day, as of July 1st, that was the last numbers I got, we have gotten 698 dirty needles off the streets in our community because of our syringe services program. Our first client, once the program opened, our very first client that came stayed for our recovery program, our weekly meeting, which is right after our syringe services program. Yes, on purpose, if you're wondering. And so that was a success right there, just that very first client showing up. So yes, in addition to all this, we do have a weekly recovery meeting. We got food before it starts. We do like a 30-minute, we call it our upfront meeting, where we give away a door prize every night. We do celebrating with milestones that anybody has achieved in their recovery. And then we break out into some smaller meetings after that. We have our recovery meeting. We have what we call our Live Free meeting. It's a meeting where adults can come in and talk about mental health issues, from depression, anxiety, perfectionism, dealing with other people that has substance use disorder. I mean, it's just kind of, I call it a free for all of just coming in and kind of having some peer support and talking about these things. And so we've got that, and we've recently actually just started that group for teens and preteens too, which is really cool. So real quick, I'm running short on time because I got a whole bunch of information. So y'all just hang on. I'm going to go really fast here. Okay. All right. So other efforts include our involvement with Project Now, nurturing options for women, along with University of Tennessee in Knoxville and Dr. Meshke and the awesome Jennifer Torville, who's on here, Trent with the Stand Coalition in Scott County, Servolution here in Claiborne County. We've got a grant focused on neonatal abstinence syndrome. So we're working to reduce substance use disorder, specifically in women of childbearing ages. So through that grant, we're able to do trainings on trauma and ACEs and addictive brain. We've created a Give a Lift program for volunteers to be able to come in and transport people to recovery meetings or probation or whatever it is they need to go to. And so that part of the program does some mileage, pays some mileage back. We've done some billboard and some public service stuff on stigma reduction. We're also, our organization is very involved with other organizations in our community. One of the things Eric mentioned earlier was naloxone. We keep Narcan at our church. We have trainings from time to time. We want to get that available to anybody and everybody that needs it. So my advice for faith leaders, do something, do something. The enemy is wreaking havoc in our communities, and not enough faith-based organizations are stepping up to fight back against the enemy. So first, you got to lead from the pulpit. If we've got any pastors on here, it's got to start with you from the pulpit. You got to believe in what you're doing. And I don't just mean talk about it, I mean get involved. Start with education. Learn for yourself about addiction and trauma and ACEs and mental health first aid. Go to some of these trainings. Then make sure your congregation is being trained on this. The first Saturday of every month, we do a committed, or at one Saturday every month, we do a committed to community training. Tomorrow, we're doing a trauma-informed community training. Elora or Laurie, would one of you all share the, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but the link to sign up for that, because we've got some seats open. And then Dr. Winbigler is going to be here to do motivational interviewing training on August the 7th. And I think that link is already out there. So, also, Marta mentioned this, learn the language. We've got to reduce stigma in our communities. And so again, it's got to start from the pulpit. It's got to start from our church leaders.
1 minute.
Yes, 1 minute. Okay. And so we've got to start changing our language and letting that filter down throughout our congregations and our organizations. Get to know your people in recovery, attend recovery programs, work in the food pantry, work in the clothing closet. I noticed somebody, Amy said, you know, being in the trenches, you got to get down in the trenches with the people you serve. I actually had Monty Burt's quote about the opposite of addiction is relationship. I'm going to skip over that here. Best way to start a recovery congregation, reach out to Eric Landry, your faith-based coordinator. Eric's great to work with. He will put countless hours into your organization to help you do that. Not only that, but reach out to me. I'll come speak to you, speak to your group, help you in any way that I can. Most of all, be patient. It's going to start out slow. It's going to start out with some resistance. Be patient, pray through it, and God will work through your organization to set people free from substance use disorder. So there you go. I got a whole bunch more, but Laurie's going to shut me up, so I got to quit now.
You are so good on time. Thank you, Pastor Kyle. And I'm sorry I missed your 2-minute warning, but I couldn't squeeze it in there.
I'm sure you couldn't.
Now I have the pleasure of turning the floor over to Reverend Deborah Schultz. Deb?
Hey guys. Wow, what an act to follow. Well, I'm going to try to fill in the gaps a little bit. Actually, what Marta and Pastor Kyle haven't. So hopefully I can do that. But first off, let me just start by talking about our genesis as Rescue 180. I started Rescue 180 actually as a ministry, a jail ministry in 1998. And then it morphed into a community coalition in about 2009. And at that time, it was basically just talking about underage drinking. And so over the last 12 to 13 years, we have worked very hard for our community to bring in all the funding that we can to educate about addiction. It has gone from underage drinking and added underage tobacco use. pills, full population, also stimulants, and every substance pretty much that is available for misuse, I should say, definitely opioids, heroin, obviously involved with Tennessee Department of Mental Health, granted by the TBI. The children's ministry there is amazing. Drug endangered children that we're reaching our community with the children. Timby is a little stuffed animal that we use to sort of reach the children in our schools. Also working with the Cadillac of grants, which was a God thing completely. Rescue 180 is a God thing completely from the very beginning, with the White House and the Doug Free Communities Grant. We were granted that. And also many other grants have come our way about stimulants. Now also crisis unit that we're going to be educating about the need to fill in a gap for mental health for our youth. And I mean, it just keeps coming and coming. And so I guess really what I wanted to focus on more than anything today, and hopefully fill in a gap, Rescue 180 now is a full-fledged resource center in Jefferson County, Tennessee. And we are serving a population of 54,000 people. And we are open to help folks with recovery, prevention education. We provide all of the, pretty much all of the above that both of my colleagues have just spoken about in terms of Narcan, ACEs. We actually do a class at my church called Overcomers ACEs, which is a faith-based ACEs training, traumatic brain. And the biggest thing that my passion has become, it seems like God has put me, I am an evangelist, and finding who I was in God and how God would use me in this arena has been a daily thing and exciting. As a very young girl in the Methodist Church, MARTA, I was called to the mission field at the age of 11. And for the very get-go, my heart has been toward the broken. And it seemingly many, many years later, I won't say how many now for sure, the Lord has kept me there. And I am just calling myself a servant of the Most High God. And when I get a door open to me, I try my best to communicate to everyone the same thing and the same mercy that God has communicated to me. And one of my favorite scriptures is Matthew 25, that Jesus said, if you have done it unto the least of these, you have done it unto me. And I hear that at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I have worked hard to morph and blend. I'm now a certified prevention practitioner, as Laurie shared. And as God has allowed me to walk this path, and with Rescue 180, I feel humbled now that we have 6 employees and we're able to actually put our money where our mouth is. My CPRS obviously has been in recovery, and actually was one of my girls in the drug court as I worked in that with that team with Judge Sloan and many other great mentors in my life. And now 2 other girls have come on board that have also been in the drug court and doing great. And so to see them go from full active addiction into their identity in Christ, and that's where I guess I want to go. You know, in order to communicate with my faith-based colleagues, I'm just going to say this is the elephant in the room, and I'm the last one on here. So I guess I'm just going to preach. So talking about whether or not addiction is moral failure. And so I have studied the word on many levels, prayed a lot about this. I have watched some of the most wonderful human beings, the most loving human beings, end up still dealing with addiction in their lives, okay, as a disease. I do believe it is a disease, and I do believe it is a brain disease. I have seen some of the greatest people obey and seek the face of God that have had addiction. I've seen, and I've also done the funeral of someone who loved the Lord thy God with all their heart and mind and soul, and their neighbor is themselves, and they have been buried. This is a difficult place for me because I'm not always received well by my faith-based brothers and sisters. I'm not a liberal. I feel I'm a theologian, and but it's not about the mind and the intellect. I love knowledge, but it's about the love of Christ. And one of the things I present to folks, even in the recovery realm and the 12-step programs, which we support, is I tell them that Jesus said, you are now a new creature in Christ. All things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. And the class that I do is actually called Clean Slate. And I love to present to my people that even come into my center, if they don't want the faith-based part, they don't have to get it. I'm not going to get my Bible and start swatting them out the door or into my office and, try to brainwash them. I want to be an example. I want to live it. I wish every church was like Pastor Kyle's and Pastor Marta's. But I'm going to tell you, unfortunately, we're not there, folks. I'm sorry. Because I have seen the greatest barrier has been our faith-based community. And for me as a minister, that hurts me deeply. And so this barrier I'm praying about, and I ask for wisdom, but I want to be as wise as a serpent and not, as wise as a serpent, not as harmless as a dove. I want to be that person that can be a servant to both communities. I want to be that advocate that can bring the two together. And I appreciate Eric because he has recognized our coalition because we are a faith-based 501c3, which we worked for many years actually, as a recovery congregation, even though we have 7 employees. But it's just another way of me saying that I do give God the glory for all that God has trusted us with here at Rescue 180. And it's very important to me that I can continue to educate my community on prevention. We actually do a column in our community and our community newspaper every other week called More Than an Ounce. Also been educating about mental health. And I mentioned to Laurie earlier, we're actually doing a series on mental health among ministers. That's right. We're not perfect either. And that's my whole point of bringing all this up is that, I've even presented this to some of my faith-based friends and saying, what if you woke up in the morning and you had an addiction and that was in your brain and you could not get that out? Ooh, walking in the shoes of that person. God forbid that you would wake up in the morning with addiction, my friend, and that you would have to walk down the path of being accepted by those who exemplify Christ or those that are in society, and then you mess up, you get caught and you go to jail and you're a felon, and then you go back out and you get clean and you try to find a job and you're treated like you're lower than an actual human being. That's what Rescue 180 is about. Rescue means salvation, and 180 means turning around. And where I like to point my folks is where I've been, and that is to my identity in Christ. And that in the Bible, it tells us that from the foundations of the earth, that God knew us. He knew us from the foundations of the earth, and he has a blueprint. That's why we all have different fingerprints. So I have deeply believe with all my heart that everybody has a purpose, and no matter what cross they're bearing or whatever they're going through, I want to be somehow facilitate their way back to that identity from the foundations of the earth that God has given to them. And so I believe with everything inside of me that like the 2 churches that we just saw, I would love to see a revolution of my faith-based folks, of understanding addiction and not making those folks feel like they need to be segregated, like they're humans just like we are. There's diabetes, and there's cancer, and there's addiction, and so that is one of my main passions of communicating that education to our faith-based community. We are a resource center here in Jefferson County. We anyone can walk in 9 to 5, but we have a crisis line. We are on a mapping grant with the BJA, with our justice system, and you can call our crisis line 24/7, and you can reach out to us, and believe me, they do. And we stay busy. We're in connection with every other aspect that's been mentioned here today. I love being a part of ARCorp. Been with them now for, I think, 2-3 years now. Is it? I lose track of time. So tell me when I'm about up here too, Lori. So absolutely encourage every single person on here. If you're in a church, communicate with your pastor, communicate with the congregation about understanding what addiction is about. And no, I say it is no respect of persons. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. You can become in that category or have someone in your life that is dealing with addiction. And the untouchables, as we talked about earlier, Lori, whether it be the medical community or a faith-based community,
1 minute.
we're never too old to learn. We're never too old to understand and have compassion to reach out to our neighbor and offer them love. I guess that's pretty much it. And if there's any questions, too late for that, but send them to me in the chat box. But we're here in Jefferson City, Tennessee, and we would love for you to stop by and see us. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Deborah, Pastor Kyle, Reverend Marta. You are all so incredibly inspirational with the work that you've done, and we can only foresee that there's going to be a lot more work that you will be doing to inspire us further. At this point, we are opening the floor for questions. I see that Guadalupe thinks that her question has been answered, so I will move past that one. And the first one that I would ask is, do you have any tips or suggestions on leading your congregation into a growing recovery ministry? What might be your first steps that you might recommend given your experience? And maybe we could do a Marta and then Pastor Kyle and then Reverend Deborah.
Okay, thank you. I think for me, the first step we had to do was to recognize our own addictions. And we did that by education. We did that by being very transparent. We did that in our step studies and the other book studies that we did. We just tried to be open and honest and all of us in the game. I will share with you one comment from one of our elderly members. She said that she was kind of disappointed that more people from our church didn't come to our recovery meetings. She said, we all need this. So that was how we got started.
Thank you. Pastor Kyle?
Yeah,
Tips and
so I
suggestions.
definitely agree with everything Marta just said. Absolutely. I mean, it's got to start with your congregation. It's got to start with your congregation being real about who they are. Because you got to get them on board before you can't just go throw something in, or you're going to get resistance very quickly. And I'll just tell you, anybody that's on here that's thinking, oh, wow, we want to start a recovery congregation, you're going to get resistance within your congregation. You're possibly may have some people leave your church because they don't quite grasp the realities and the truth that Deborah was sharing a little while ago about substance use disorder and it not being moral failing. And so some people don't get that. My other thing, I'm hurrying, Lori. My other thing is reach out to Eric Landry. I know Eric, if he hasn't shared his contact information, we'll get that out there to everybody. Reach out to Eric. Get him in and let him start taking you through the steps. He will not only come in and give you the guidelines on how to set up a recovery congregation, and he's going to come in spirit on the spiritual, like Eric is a brother in Christ, like Eric is a great connection great connection with God, and he's going to bring that in as a resource for you. So lean on your faith-based coordinator for in this case, East Tennessee, to come in and to help you do that. Again, on the organizational side, but on the spiritual side as well.
Thank you, Pastor Kyle. Deborah?
Yeah, I would just reiterate what they're saying, ditto, ditto, but also add, that these folks that they would be dealing with have a lot of shame usually coming in. But in talking to your faith-based community, you have to soft shoe your way in a little bit and just, make it part of benevolence, or make it part of just any kind of reach out, because folks, I have learned so much myself over several years. So transparency, like Marta said, I think that's number one. If you're communicating with a pastor or someone and saying, hey, this is evangelism, this is reaching out, this is missionary work here. And we really need to do that if we're going to be the hands and feet of Christ. So just using their language too to go in and speak with them. That's my advice.
Thank you all so much for that insight. Deborah, Laura has a question. Do individuals have to live in Jefferson County to utilize the services at Rescue 180, including the crisis line?
Sorry, I was going to try to answer her. Absolutely not. We'll take any call, and our resources go all the way to Johnson City. We'll take people to detox in Johnson City, and help them get into recovery anywhere and everywhere that potentially that will take them. And so we'd be happy to serve anyone in this area.
Thank you so very much. Marta,
Hey, Laurie,
yes,
can I throw in one more quick thing really quick?
please do.
Not every church is going to have the facility or the manpower or what it takes to like start a weekly recovery meeting. You don't have to do that to be a recovery congregation. So like you can always, a recovery congregation, you can just welcome people in and love on them, as both Marta and Deborah, both of them mentioned. But not only that, but like seek other recovery programs going on in your community, and ask them if can they use your bus that's just sitting at your church unless you have church. Can you transport people? Can you come in like one night a month and do food and feed people coming into like there are other ways to get in and be involved with recovery without doing a weekly recovery meeting at your church. And so I just wanted to throw that in really quick because that's huge. Honestly, that's something that I really desire in our community that we don't have. We don't have other churches that are supporting, and I'm just being real with you, that are supporting our program in our community. So if you're in a community and your church is not like, go support another recovery program or an organization like Rescue 180. Go support them. Go put your resources into what they're doing if you can't do it at your own facility. So I just wanted to throw that in real quick.
Thank you so much for that, Pastor Kyle. We have just 1 minute left, so I'm going to close down our question and answer session at this time. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Jennifer Torville, who will be guiding us through our second panel. Thank you all for participating with the Q&A.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all. That was wonderful discussion and presentations. We have another panel of 3 people, and these people previously used drugs and found support from faith-based organizations on their journey to recovery. So it will be set up the same as the last panel. So each will have 13 minutes to speak. I will provide a 2-minute and a 1-minute warning when time is almost up. So our first panelist is going to be Laura Pritchard. She is a person in long-term recovery. She's a licensed master social worker who's working with Servolution Health Services through the University of Tennessee Project Now. She's a member of the board of directors for Live Free, Claiborne which is a nonprofit with the mission to support wellness and eliminate addiction to drugs and alcohol in Claiborne County. We also have Ron Stevens, who is a certified peer recovery specialist that's worked hard advocating for those who suffer from adverse childhood experiences. He's also on the front lines in the battle to end stigma related to substance use disorder. He and countless others are living proof that people with substance use disorder can change the narrative of life and turn their lives around, and believes that we need the support of each community to drop the stigma. We also have Dawn Radix. She was freed from drug use by Jesus Christ and has been in long-term recovery for 23 years. She's also an active member of the RCOR East Tennessee Consortium Youth Working Group and provides substance use disorder prevention programming to youth across Union County. So I will give the 3 questions that our panelists will be answering, and then we'll go in that order. So starting with Laura, and then Ron, and then Dawn, and you'll each have 13 minutes. So our first question is, across time, how has your recovery been supported by a faith-based community? Our second question is, how do you wish the support of the faith community had been different? And our third question is, what strategy or advice would you share with faith leaders or parishioners about their substance use disorder prevention efforts? So if everybody will mute and turn off their cameras if you haven't already, then Laura, we are ready for you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm very grateful to be a person in long-term recovery and one of the ones that made it, and be able to speak with you today when so many that I know did not. And I definitely am very aware of that fact. I'm also very grateful to be a part of what Reverend Marta was talking about, expanding the access to mental health care in my new position at Servolution. So the question across time, how has your recovery been supported by the faith-based community? When I first read this question, my knee-jerk reaction to this question was that my recovery was not supported by the faith-based community. I think there's a lot of validity in me feeling that way, and I feel it's important for me not to overlook that. That is the first thought that comes to my head when I am asked that question. But after further examination, I realized during my early recovery, I was in more churches than I ever had been. My spiritual background, growing up, I was in a Baptist church in Claiborne County, went to church until I was old enough to say I don't want to go. So around probably 14, 15. So during my early recovery, AA meetings and NA meetings, they are typically held in churches. And so AA and NA makes a point not to be affiliated with churches, but they are definitely usually, that's where the meetings are. So probably in my early recovery, I can say safely that I went to over 200 meetings when I lived in Knoxville. And, the thing that sticks out there is that walking in and out of churches, I don't recall one parishioner. And people who are not in recovery are not welcome to attend those meetings if they're closed. But, you can accidentally be there on purpose to have a cup of coffee when everyone's getting there, but I don't ever recall meeting one person who actually attended the church. So I found my recovery in a halfway house. That's where I actually got long-term lasting sobriety. And that was a 6-month program in Knoxville. It was actually called Agape. And I just love that that is part of my story. So one thing that Agape did was the level system. For 3 months, you were on the porch is what they called it. So we were bused to meetings. We had education daily. We had groups daily. So after 3 months, you actually had to go and find a job and use public transportation and use your resources to get to meetings. But the point in the faith-based community is that level 1, we couldn't even call our family. And that only lasted for maybe a week or two. But the point is to get in there and get your head just focused on being there. Level 2, the next thing you could do is call a family member, and we actually were able to walk to church. And so this was a very special experience for me. The location was downtown Knoxville around the St. Mary's, used to be St. Mary's Hospital. And so the church that was close by was actually a Black church. I can't remember the denomination, but if you know anything about the Black church, historically, culturally, they wear really nice clothes. You know, the women had hats on, suits. The men had suits and, you know, just really, really dressed nice. And so the one thing that you usually don't have in early recovery are nice clothes. And a lot of us, even if we had clothes, you start gaining weight once you get sober, and then you are outgrowing whatever clothes you have. So we walked to church in our raggy clothes. And, you know, when we walked in that door, we were greeted enthusiastically. They were excited for us to be there, sticking out like sore thumbs, 3 or 4 of us at a time. They were happy for us to be there. It made me feel valued, you know, and just the act of getting to go to this place, being trusted to walk there, it was something normal that I actually did for the first time without using alcohol or drugs. And I did what I was supposed to do. I went and then I went back. And in the meantime, being spiritually fed a little bit. So after 1 year of sobriety, I started rebuilding my spiritual foundation. Once I was ready, God jumped in major. I went through a big spiritual enlightenment. It was just very beautiful. I started praying. I read spiritual books. I was meditating. And then skipping forward a year or so, I eventually ran into my husband, Kyle. He was instrumental in taking me from my spiritual enlightenment, knowing there's a God loving me unconditionally. You know, when God rushed in, I think that's the first time I felt unconditional love in my life. And so he was instrumental in giving me the theological backing and what's going on in my life, how God is working with me, and then helping me build a personal relationship with Jesus. So when I moved from Knoxville back to Claiborne County to Tazewell, my spirituality became my recovery, because rural area, we didn't have a lot of access to meetings. The one AA meeting, because again, like someone mentioned, you know, AA saved my life. I love AA. And I walked into the first AA meeting when I got back to town, and I just kind of wanted to walk back out because I knew everyone there, and it just felt, there was no anonymity, you know, it just felt different from the scene I was coming from. So my spiritual community became my connection to others, my service, my moral compass, my growing relationship with God, all these things that if you stay in AA, you're actually practicing those when you go through the steps. And God calls us to do all those things too. So the next question, how do I wish the support of the faith community had been different? Well, I guess probably just being vocal about being a church that supports people in recovery. So you've made enough noise in the community so that people know, hey, if you're in recovery, they're going to accept you over there. So you don't even feel like you're going to be rejected if you walk through those doors. So what strategy or advice would you share with faith leaders or parishioners about their substance use disorder prevention efforts? I want to overshadow everything that I'm going to talk about with a certain statistic. Eric shared some updated statistics from the Tennessee Department of Health and Substance Abuse, but stay with me because my statistics are from 2016 and for a very particular reason. So in 2016, in the state of Tennessee, there were over 2,160 people of faith per one person who died of an overdose. And that's just an amazing ratio. You know, you think about teachers, one teacher to 30 kids, and that's a lot, you know, but imagine if your kid came home and said, we have 30 teachers to one kid. You would be delighted. You would think maybe that's a little overkill. It probably won't take that much, but you wouldn't feel like that was a statistic that was going to hurt your child. You know, you feel like the likelihood that they're going to succeed just skyrocketed because so many people are working with them. So going back to the ratio of people of faith to individuals who lost their life due to a fatal drug overdose, that's 2,160 to 1 in the year 2016. This statistic has particular importance in my story because in 2015, my brother died of a fatal drug overdose. He was 29 years old. And so you're telling me that my brother had 2,160 chances for just one person to reach out to him and say, yeah, you're a mess, but I love you anyway. God loves you anyway. Develop a friendship, mentorship. So I want to share that you as a church are a powerful resource. An addict in recovery's success exponentially increases when there's a continuum of care. That means a team of professionals working together, doctors, psychiatrists, social workers, peer recovery support, AA and NA meetings. So it takes a village. And our churches are the spiritual lifeblood of the village. If our churches aren't a part of this continuum of care, then we are missing a big piece, because recovery does have a spiritual solution. It's just that people in early recovery usually aren't to that place to be seeking that spiritual. They're just trying to get fed, get clothes on their back, not use. The priorities are different in early recovery. But if you're able to stay sober long enough, you realize it is a spiritual solution. Thank you. So the strategy that I would encourage is the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse has a faith-based toolkit. My husband Kyle and I, we were lucky enough to go to a conference, and we got this toolkit, and I keep mine close by. I will add a link. It is a PDF. I'll add a link into the chat box when I'm done. But in it, you know, it says educate, be welcoming, and support. Education is key to understanding physically what's going on in our brains during active addiction. Understanding leads to empathy rather than judgment. Welcome. So addicts aren't used to being someone, being someone that someone's happy to see. Chances are they have really low self-esteem and they have been a burden on their family and friends. So when I was greeted by the church, when I was in early recovery, you know, when they were excited to see me, it made me feel seen. And then support. It starts in the pulpit. Be vulnerable. You set the tone for your congregation. Don't conceal your own wounds. Speak openly and honestly, and chances are your congregation will too. You know, we all go to great lengths to not feel pain. And the anesthetics of our day are alcohol, prescription pills, food, materialism. All of these are readily available. And so I encourage you to use resources around you. You don't have to do it alone. You can plug into local ministries that are already doing great work. We are getting hooked up with Young Life in our area, which is so important for our young people, and we support that. You have local experts that can do trainings that probably will be happy to come in at any time. So, and often halfway houses and rehabs are looking for people to come in and do enrichment. You don't have to do a Bible study. You can go in and do yoga We had people come in and teach us to hula hoop one time at Agape, and we all had a blast. So doing simple things like that, getting your face out in the community and also just loving on people makes such a big difference. And I'll close with that.
Thank you so much, Laura. I never get tired of hearing recovery stories, and that was a really great one. So thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. And Ron, excuse me, Ron, you're up.
Thanks, Jennifer. My name's Ron, and I am also grateful to be a addict in long-term recovery. You know, I'm kind of, not kind of, I'm exactly like Laura when she was talking about going to churches. You know, I hadn't been into a church for probably 15, 20 years before I got into recovery. And in early recovery, that was the one place that I was told that I would be safe, you know, because just like most addicts, I felt invisible and I felt worthless, and I felt I had a lot of shame and guilt. And, you know, in fact, for the longest time, I tried to blame God for everything that ever happened to me. You know, like, how could you let this happen to me when everybody else is happy and have homes and families and stuff like that? And it was just terrible times for me, you know, and the only time I ever prayed was for God to take me out of this world, because I didn't want to live. It's hard to ever talk like stuff like this without getting emotional, you know. I had the same 3 questions that she had, you know, and in the beginning, just going to the meetings, the churches would open their doors, and the thing that she talked about was there were never any parishioners around, and that kind of you know, for a church to trust people who have been addicts, who have been in prison, who have been guilty of all kinds of things, with keys to the church. They from the beginning, the faith-based community has supported my recovery. You know, and I also heard Deborah talking about these certain programs being a God thing. I want everybody to know that I am a God thing. Each addict is a God thing, and that's why I'm here. You know, Marta, Kyle, and Deborah, you know, you guys are all just pioneers for building bridges between faith-based communities and those who suffer from SUD. You know, I got a friend that says, thank God for NA and thank NA for God. Because I don't think that I would have the relationship that I have with God and Jesus if it weren't for the 12 steps of recovery. You know, I worked hard on myself to get here. You know, I always wonder when we're talking about how do I wish that the faith-based community, how it could be different. You know, they have no problems with the mission fields and adopting a project here and a project there. But I always wondered what would it be like if churches would adopt like a halfway house, or adopt a program that included people in recovery. I thought it could be a better place that way. You know, that would put a face to a name, and then and that would help each other realize that we're all humans. We're human beings. Some are less fortunate. Some are more fortunate. You know? Listen, my advice would be to become aware that of the true adversary that we're facing. And it's not drugs. It's not alcohol. It's not sex or food or anything. It's why we abuse these things. You know, it was never about that stuff. Always about why we did that stuff, and when we talk about gateways, you know, the true gateway is trauma. And I know there's a lot of stigma when it comes to people with SUD or the recovery. You know, if we were to drop the drugs or whatever, and we started to work on the trauma, then maybe we could get a little bit more done. You know, because that is the true issue. You know, I lost my parents when I was 2 years old. You know, and I grew up on the streets of Michigan. If I would have had a church possibly take me in and teach me, things might be different. Not that I'm wishing things were different, because everything that happened to me needed to happen for me to be in this moment. And I'm eternally grateful for the hopeless desperation that I've received. You know, I think that if we can attack the trauma, we can get a better hold on the substance abuse disorder, mental health, and in some cases even prevent stuff like suicide. You know, help others become aware that trauma doesn't have to be a life sentence. If we can do that, we can provide the antidote to disease thinking, because that's what I have. I have a thinking problem. You know, and it's just like they were talking about, Dr. Monty Burks talking about the opposite of addiction is connection. You know, it's love, it's acceptance. You know, I have to be honest about what I'm dealing with, and I have to be open-minded about what you're dealing with, and how I can grow from that even. And then I have to be willing to do things that are uncomfortable for me, you know. And those two things, that's how it works. You know, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't honest, open-minded, and willingness. Recovery tells us these things are indispensable. These are the things that I can't live without. And these are the things that no person can live without and be happy. You know, I'm just really grateful to be part of this panel. You know, I dedicate my life to trying to help people deal with ACEs. You know, and I'm very interested in what Marta had to say about the program that they had. But that's my true feelings on substance abuse disorder. That if we were to drop that and started attacking the trauma, I think we would be able to reach more people in the community, and it would drop the stigma a little bit by the wording that we use. You know, I think every pastor has good intentions, and they want to lead their church in the right direction. But it's about making the congregation aware of what addiction truly is. It is a disease. It is a thinking disease. You know? And one more thing, I'll end it with this. I can't say enough about what Eric Landry does for this community, for the entire East region of Tennessee. And I've been on Marta's STEP program. She invited me on there. I've been to the Hill and took several learning classes up there, workshops and stuff like that. And I work side by side with Deborah in our core, and I support and I advocate for all three of their programs. And I'm blessed to be here, and I want to continue to be here, and I want to reach everybody that I can. You know, maybe sometimes the wording isn't what needs to be changed. So that's all I have. I don't even need a 2-minute warning.
Well, thank you, Ron. Always a pleasure to hear from you. Thank you for your time. And we have one more panelist. Dawn, if you are ready, you can go ahead.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Like the others, I am thankful to be here as well. And not to sound rude, but it was the other way around. I spent 23 years in addiction and was freed by the Lord Jesus Christ. So I have been recovered, and I will say that because that's just the plain simpleness of it. I did not have to search for meetings and that sort of thing once I found the Lord, or I should say he found me. It just happened. When it happened, I couldn't have explained to you what happened. I couldn't have explained the circumcision without hands, any of that stuff. I just knew when I called on his name that I stepped out of my car a different person. So a little background, I grew up in church as well. And when, like Laura said, when I got to be about 12, I decided I didn't want to go anymore. So I didn't go. Gave my mom a really hard time about going. And about a year or so later, I started smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol and smoking weed, all of that stuff. And then it progressed from there to pills. When I was about 20 years old, I had a surgery and I got a prescription pain medicine from the doctor. And I realized, this doesn't make me have to deal with the stuff I don't want to deal with. And from there, it just took off and went downhill. I avoided any faith-based, any proclamation of faith. I said, no, I don't want a part of that. So it wasn't ever for me that the people trying to reach out to me were not doing so. It was me saying, I do not want a part of that. And Kyle actually mentioned the prodigal son. And it's interesting because the Bible says in Luke 15:16 at the very end, it says, and no man gave unto him, unto the prodigal son. And then the next verse starts, and when he came to himself, Ronald mentioned hopeless desperation, everything gone, everything wasted away. My marriage had dissolved. My child, I only saw half of the time. I spent time in rehabs and institutions as far as suicidal type things. And I had nothing. I had family who loved me, but their love was not enough for me. And I got a nudge one day to go to church. So I went to church. And basically, what I heard there was faith. Romans 10:17 says, so then faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. He was doing exactly what he needed to do. They were there. He was preaching the cross of Christ. where he took my shame and my sin, my guilt, everything. He took it. So I didn't have to bear it anymore. And one day I said, I want that. I want that because I cannot do it anymore. And you know what? I haven't had to. I was 5 years prior to that, I had gone to a methadone clinic and I thought, I'm going to get clean this way. I'm going to get clean. And all it did, it left me in a place to be comfortable with my sin, with what I was doing. I didn't use a whole lot of other things at that point, but I still abused the methadone because I was still in that same lifestyle pattern. And just a month before I cried out to the Lord, I was trying to get with my brother to figure out a way where I could stay on at the methadone clinic. And it just didn't work out. Didn't work out that way. And I'm thankful it didn't, because I've had people tell me, Dawn, you should really own your successes in your recovery. But I didn't do anything. I just said, I can't do it anymore. You have to take it. And it's gone. I know that's hard to believe, to have faith in, but I don't wake up and think about, you know, if I'm having a bad day, what numbers in my back pocket, or try to keep my brain occupied to not use, or any of that stuff. One of the things that happened after that was I was working a delivery route, and I got a call out of the blue from a friend I went to high school with, and she asked me if I'd be interested in working for iCare. And so I said, yeah, sure, that'd be great. So I worked with iCare for almost 2 years, and then the contract has ended, and the Lord has taken me somewhere else. So I had to follow him. And I'm thankful for that. But I want to, I don't wish that any of the faith-based had been any different, because I had to get to a point, and I'm thankful the Lord took me to that point and allowed me to get to that point where there was nothing else for me. Like I said, and Ron said it too, it's hard not to talk about these things and get emotional, because when you do have no hope, and then you do, it's such a beautiful place to be. And it's not, I don't have just faith in myself that I can do something good. If I'm able to do anything good, it's because the Lord Jesus Christ in me. One of my favorite verses says, Hebrews 12:2, looking unto Jesus, the author. He authored it. He said, you can have this faith, and the finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. I don't know what else would make you leap for joy to say, hey, here's a free gift of salvation. Hey, I can take your pain away. Yeah, you're still going to go through rough times. Yeah, you're still going to go through desperate times. But I will always say that I'm recovered, because the Lord just took that away. I think there's a lot of good work that can be done. And my only suggestion would be just to stick with the Word of God. Put Jesus first, and everything else will fall into place as it needs to. If it doesn't, then we still need to glorify God in it. I don't know. Does anybody have any questions? I probably talk a little faster than anybody else. Maybe not Kyle, but.
Thank you so much, Dawn. That was wonderful. We did have a question in the chat. Let me pull that back up from Guadalupe, a comment and a question. So it was, and if you guys want to answer this in the same order that you presented, or Dawn, since you're already on there, if you want to go first, that's fine too. I have heard this question often when I hear presentations such as this one. Did you ever not attend a recovery group because they are mainly at churches? What's the panel's thought on that?
Like I said, I personally would not go. I was convicted about living the way that I was. So I personally wouldn't go anywhere that Jesus was mentioned. I just wouldn't. My mom would sit and talk to me and say, Dawn, you need to give your life to the Lord. And I'd tell her, look, I'm just different. You're going to have to get over it. So, I mean, I guess, yes, I would avoid places because they were at a church, but I also just didn't really care too much about going into recovery meetings either. I did, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't at the end of myself yet. So somebody else can go on.
Thank you, Dawn. Ron or Alora, do you have any comments to add to that?
I do. You know, out of that hopeless desperation, when I have, you know, I thank God, because out of all my second chances, this is my favorite. I agreed to do anything that it would took. Whatever it took. So I didn't care where we go. If you wanted to have a meeting in a bathroom, I was all for it, because that was the one commitment that I made, to do whatever it took to stay clean, because I was tired of living that life. And it didn't mind me. I grew up in church. I said that I had a strong resentment against God, but I didn't have a strong resentment against the church, because most of the time they were nice to me. They did not stigmatize me. I stigmatized myself. You know, I felt like I wasn't worth going into a place of worship, but I ended up going anyways. You know, even if just the beginning, I wanted to get out of the halfway house because it was real boring and hard. You know, but I never had any kind of resentment against churches, just towards God. Thanks.
Yeah, so I can say that when we started Live Free, when we were at the church and we knew we wanted to do recovery, it took a lot of prayer for us to figure out what that was going to look like, because Celebrate Recovery was on our, something that we were looking at doing. And we had visited some amazing Celebrate Recovery programs. There was an awesome one in Oak Ridge. But I felt like coming out of addiction, people would shy away from going to Celebrate Recovery because it felt like you needed to have khakis on and you were probably going to sing hymnals. And if you're in the depths of your addiction, that's skipping ahead a few steps. I believe, I'm a social worker, so Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we first have to meet our basic needs: food, clothes, safety, like a place to sleep. Usually when someone is ready to surrender in their addiction and get help, they've went all the way down. You talk about rock bottom. That's usually when they have very little clothes, not a lot of food, probably don't have a place to sleep at night. And to throw them right into a place of skipping ahead to let's talk about your spirituality, I think it's not given enough grace period there. So we really talked about that. And so that's why we didn't go with Celebrate Recovery. And now we know it's a God thing because Live Free's turned into a nonprofit and is doing so many more things. And so that was the right choice for us. But I can say, as a person coming out of addiction and a person in addiction, I know that there is some apprehension to going to things like that. And we hear it too about even Live Free meetings because they are held in a church, you know, and but we try to, Kyle will get up there and talk and he'll say, you know, we're not going to shove God down your throat, but we are in a church. I am a pastor. And so we're going to be talking about God, but that doesn't mean that you have to feel that way right now. And so we just try and be mindful of that.
Thank you. Sorry about the delay. I had my chat box stuck on. I couldn't get it off. Does anybody else have any questions? If not, then I'm going to go through a question or two that I had sent to me previously. Okay, so then I'll ask one of these questions that I have. And you can answer them in the same order if that works for you. So how can we help the faith-based communities become a bridge that can bring awareness into their communities and help end the stigma and thoughts that people who use drugs are not human?
Do you want me to go first, Jennifer?
Sure, that'd be fine.
Okay, I didn't know which way. So this morning when I was doing my own personal, I have spiritual time on my drive to work. I was led into Luke 6 at the end of verse 35. Jesus says, "For he is gracious to the ungrateful and evil," he being God. And so when you're working with people in active addiction and in early recovery, it can feel like you're spinning your wheels with a person who is ungrateful and evil, because relapse is just a part of many people's stories. But that's, again, because it takes so much support for someone to actually make it. And the church, like I said before, is such an essential part of that continuum of care, that not getting bogged down, not getting discouraged, and remembering that God is gracious to the ungrateful and evil. So giving grace. And so whatever that looks like in you, in your congregation, giving grace, because we've all been given grace one way or another. We all have a story. It's just that, you know, addiction takes you to places that stories are a little more, can be darker and resemble each other, but it's that key piece of grace.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments for that question?
I do. Ron here. For me, I just got to continue to keep showing up. I gotta keep doing the things that brought me to this point. I gotta keep getting the word out there. And if I want people to accept me, I have to accept them. And at where they are, not where I am. So I have to be patient, and I have to be loving, and I have to be kind, and I do have to apply grace, because that's what's been given to me. And I know that if I'm steadfast on that path, that God's going to make things happen. He's gonna put some light on something that's said or whatever, and eventually it's going to break through, and this is going to become a revolution. You know, that's all I got.
Jennifer, I wanted to make a comment if I could.
Absolutely. You go right ahead.
So one of the things that I didn't address when I was speaking, and I think it's kind of important to bring it out here, is that I've been working on, like Ron said, sort of pioneering a bridging the gap between the faith-based community and prevention community. I've been working on doing actually out of the book of Ephesians, and it's actually an outline that my pastor did, and didn't steal it from him, but he said I could use it. And it's helping people understand their identity in Christ. And in other words, what my job is, I feel, as a minister and as a prevention specialist in that area, is to just basically present to people a walk that they can take to understand that they can recover, and that they are accepted, and that they have hope. And in coming from the faith-based aspect of it, is to understand that, God is never going to forsake them, and that they are accepted. And then as far as going from point A to point B, like Dawn was sharing, it's amazing testimony that she has there, is understanding that walk is different for everybody. And, in the faith-based community, we believe that the Holy Spirit will do a lot of that work, and so we can't pound that into folks. We believe that the Holy Spirit will do that work as people, for all of us, will allow him to actually come in and do those things for you, or help you understand those different seasons of your life. But I just wanted to point that out, that's one of my passions, is to actually build a program. And actually, when I did jail ministry, I actually had a program called Alpha and Omega that I did to the women in the jails, about accountability, and also about identity, and understanding those things in your life are very important. And I do like what Dawn said about identifying herself as recovered. That is actually one of the names of our new thing that we're doing here, is called Rescued and Recovered. So, but that's what we actually do in our church. And we have this class, and we focus on trauma, and we want to get to the root. We don't want to feel like we're just placating or band-aiding or any, just a band-aid. We really want to feel like open arms, whosoever will come, and we're just going to deal with trauma. We're not going to deal with the negative consequences. It may be substance misuse, it may be other things. So we want to get to those root problems. But sorry, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you, Deb. And I believe Marta had one last comment she wanted to make. Marta?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say that I appreciate everything everybody's saying, and to say that at our group we make a definite effort to include both traditionally, and I say that with quotes around it, sacred and secular kinds of things. Like we sing Desperado because it really, it laments with us about what it's like to be stuck in a no-win situation. And we sing the House of the Amazing Sun, the House of the Rising Sun, we couple it with Amazing Grace just to soothe our need to say that, but to realize that if the image of God is in all of us, it doesn't necessarily have to sound churchy. So I hope that's clear, and I hope that you hear the grace in the way I say it. But thank you all for listening to that.
Thank you, Marta. Dawn, did you have any last comments? And then I think we're going to wrap it up.
I have one if possible.
Sure, you go right ahead, Eric.
The Bible says in the book of Philemon, it's 25 little verses, and if you read that book, it greatly illustrates the bedrock of my ministry, in that Paul creates a bridge between a broken man and restores him to his proper place. And I think we as churches, if we use that message as a foundation of creating a bridge to bring people back, meeting people where they are, and bringing them back into restoration. This has been such a wonderful event. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you all very much for sharing and attending, and we've had a wonderful discussion. I don't have too much to add. I'm just going to close us out, and we will make some plans to do some more faith-based events, hopefully in person. And we are happy to organize an event at everybody's church if you're willing to have us. I just wanted to wrap up by saying, as everybody said today, the opposite of addiction isn't recovery, it's community and connection and relationship and love. And I think we've really seen that today with the conversations in the chat box and the presentations, and with Laura's staggering statistic that there's over 2,000 people in the faith-based community for every one that overdoses. So I think these faith-based organizations are in a really great position to help those in recovery to really be successful. So whatever we can do to help that along, please let us know. We're happy to organize events. We're happy to do trainings and education, and just know that we're here. And we thank every one of you, and we hope to see you soon. Bye, everybody.